I used to believe life was kind to me. I had a beautiful home, a healthy child, a devoted husband, and a quiet routine that kept my days steady. Mornings filled with laughter over scrambled eggs. Evenings spent on the porch, listening to my husband hum songs from his childhood while rocking our baby girl to sleep. We weren't rich, but we had peace, and that, to me, was everything. My name is Jasmine, and this is not the story I ever thought I'd tell. It's not a fairy tale. It's not even a tragedy. It's what happens when life peels away every comfort you've known and dares you to find out who you really are. But before we begin, I want to ask you one thing. If stories like this move you, if you believe in resilience, betrayal, and the kind of twists only life can write, please take a second to subscribe. It helps more than you know. Thank you. Now let's continue. It started with a cough. A deep, dry one that came out of nowhere and stuck around. My husband, Elijah, brushed it off. Allergies, he smiled. Or maybe I'm just getting old. He was 38. Then came the fevers. Nights of sweat-soaked sheets. He couldn't keep food down. I scheduled appointment after appointment, each one leading to more questions and no answers. Until one morning, after a near-fainting episode in the kitchen, Elijah was rushed to the ER. That's when they told us. His liver was failing. Badly. He'd need intensive treatment, maybe even a transplant. The doctors were cautious, gentle with their words. But I heard it in their tone. Elijah might not make it. The next few weeks passed in a blur of tests, machines, and prayers. I split myself between hospital visits and our daughter, Isla, who was only 4 and still too young to understand why Daddy wasn't home anymore. My hair thinned from stress. I lost weight. My soul felt shredded. I did what anyone would. I reached out. Family, friends, our church community, my neighbors who once invited us for barbecues and potlucks suddenly weren't answering their doors. My sister, Nia, said she was struggling financially too, even though she just posted photos from a luxury spa. My best friend, Leah, said, "I'll try to help soon," and never followed up. Soon turned into silence. Then the whispers started. She was always flaunting that perfect little family. Look at her now. I heard they didn't even have savings. So irresponsible. She thought she was better than us. Now she's begging. I wasn't begging. I was surviving. I sold my wedding ring. I sold my car. I dipped into the last of our joint savings account. I maxed out credit cards just to keep Elijah in that hospital bed. Every day, his life depended on expensive medications and constant monitoring. Every day, I showed up and held his hand, even as he slipped deeper into unconsciousness. Then came the coma. It happened 2 months in. His body just shut down. I remember staring at his chest, willing it to rise, praying for a twitch, a blink, something. But he was still. The machines did all the work now, beeping and humming like lullabies of doom. A doctor came in. I don't remember his name, just that he wore glasses and didn't make eye contact when he said, "Prepare yourself. Sometimes they don't come back." I remember feeling the floor under me like it had cracked open and swallowed me whole. My knees didn't buckle, they collapsed. I wailed loud and raw, the kind of sound you never think you'll make until grief tears it out of you. That night, I curled up beside Elijah's hospital bed and slept there. Nurses offered me blankets, tea, tissues. But what could any of that do? At home, the bills kept piling. The fridge was empty. I'd gone back to eating instant noodles. What little Isla didn't finish, I swallowed cold. I pawned everything valuable. Electronics, jewelry, even the designer bag Elijah had given me on our anniversary. The home felt colder without him. Isla asked, "When will Daddy come home?" I didn't have an answer. Then came the calls. From banks. From collectors. My credit score plunged. I couldn't afford the mortgage. I was 3 days from eviction when something strange happened. I got a call from the hospital. Elijah had opened his eyes. I rushed down without brushing my hair or putting on shoes. I ran into the room and saw him alive, pale, weak, but breathing on his own. His eyes blinked slowly, as if waking up from the longest dream. The moment our eyes met, I burst into tears. He could barely speak, but he motioned for me to come close. I leaned in. His voice was gravel. "Check the red notebook in the attic." I stared at him, confused. "What?" "Promise me jazz. Red notebook. Behind the heater." I nodded, though I didn't understand. I stayed with him for hours, holding his hand, brushing the hair from his forehead, telling him how strong he was. The nurses said his recovery was miraculous. That same doctor who told me to prepare for the worst avoided my gaze now. Later that night, I climbed into the attic, flashlight in hand. It was dusty and freezing. I moved boxes, old holiday decor, childhood photo albums. And then I saw it, wedged between insulation and the back wall, just behind the portable heater, was a red notebook. I opened it. Inside were pages and pages of notes, codes, account numbers. Elijah's handwriting, scribbled entries like investment rollover, March 2022, emergency only, and names of banks I didn't recognize. Tucked into the back cover was a USB stick. I plugged it into my old laptop and sat in stunned silence as the numbers loaded on screen. Offshore accounts, mutual funds, silent partnership in a logistics company. Elijah had stashed away more than $850,000 over the last decade. He had been saving for years, for us, and he never told me. I stared at the screen, frozen. $850,000. My brain couldn't compute it. I blinked, expecting the numbers to vanish like a dream. But they didn't. They were real, with timestamps, account details, and transfers dated as far back as 2014. Elijah, my sweet, quiet, thoughtful Elijah, had been quietly preparing for a storm I never saw coming. And he never told me. My emotions tangled in a mess I couldn't untangle. Shock, gratitude, confusion, and something else I didn't want to admit. Hurt. Why would he keep this from me? We'd cried together over bills, celebrated small financial wins, like paying off the car. I'd held his hand when the bank declined our mortgage extension last year. I thought we were in it together, thick or thin. Clearly, he had a different strategy. The USB also contained digital scans of property deeds in his name, land plots in his hometown, a storage unit lease, and even a business license under an alias I'd never heard of before. The alias? E.J. Blake Trading. Apparently, my husband had a quiet knack for logistics and had been a silent investor in a trucking company that had since doubled in value. I clutched the USB stick and leaned back on the attic floor. The insulation scratched against my legs, but I didn't care. All I could think was, this changes everything. This saves us. I went back to the hospital first thing the next morning, notebook in one hand, USB stick in the other. Elijah looked stronger. He even smiled when he saw me. "You found it," he whispered. "I found it." I nodded, unsure how to feel. "Why didn't you tell me?" He paused. His eyes flicked to the window, then back to me. "Because I didn't want you to worry. I always knew we needed a safety net, in case life did what it always does." But I worried anyway. I broke Elijah. I sold everything we had. I begged people who mocked me. I buried myself alive for you. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "but I needed to protect you. From all of it." I didn't respond. I just rested my head beside him, heart torn between relief and resentment. Over the next week, Elijah made what doctors called an impossible recovery. With renewed funds, I paid off the hospital bill in full. The staff who once gave me pitying glances now greeted me with hesitant respect. I wasn't just the struggling wife anymore. I was the woman who walked in with a check. Word got out quickly. First came Nia, my sister, who hadn't called me in weeks. Suddenly she popped up at my doorstep with a bottle of wine and a forced smile. I just wanted to see how Elijah was doing. She chirped. We've all been so worried. I didn't let her past the hallway. Oh, really? Because you didn't even text when he went into a coma. She laughed nervously. We figured you needed space. But now that things are looking up, now you want in? I snapped. Keep the wine. Keep the lies. She left in silence. Next came Leah, my so-called best friend, who had ghosted me when I needed help with groceries. She invited me to brunch, just like old times, and asked if I'd be interested in investing in her failing boutique. I declined, politely but firmly. The one that shocked me most was our neighbor, Mrs. Chambers, who once rolled her eyes at Isla's noisy laugh and suggested I discipline her better. She dropped off a casserole and handed me a note with her bank details. In case you feel led to give back. Give back. They all wanted something now, because the moment you have money, everyone forgets how they treated you when you were broke. Their amnesia was insulting, but it wasn't just the outsiders. The betrayal cut deeper from within. I checked our shared voicemail inbox and found messages from Elijah's cousin, Brian, the same cousin who told me over the phone, hospitals are expensive, maybe you should just let go. His message now, hey Jazz, just checking in. Heard about the miracle. Wow, God is good. I'm around if you ever need someone to help you manage things. Manage? He couldn't manage his own life. Then came the real punch. One night, as I was reviewing the last few files on the USB, I stumbled upon a folder labeled Contingency, Elijah's Letter. It was a video, pre-recorded, dated 6 weeks before the coma. I played it. Elijah sat in a dimly lit room, speaking straight into the camera. He looked tired, but composed. If you're seeing this, he began, it means I didn't make it. I gasped. I know this is hard. I'm sorry, I didn't tell you everything. The truth is, I didn't trust the world enough to leave you unprotected. People around us smile, but they don't mean it. They praise you one moment, mock you the next. You've seen it now. I saved what I could, built what I could, and I put it all under your name. Everything. Because I trust you. Not them. Never them. He paused, then looked straight into the lens again. Don't forgive everyone, Jasmine. Not everyone deserves it. The screen went black. My chest tightened. I didn't realize I was crying until Isla walked in and said, Mommy, your eyes are raining. I wiped them, kissed her forehead, and whispered, We're going to be okay now, baby. Over the next few days, I began to take control. I hired a financial advisor, one of my choosing, not one recommended by anyone looking for a cut. I opened an education fund for Isla. I paid off the debt collectors one by one. I even called the mortgage company and cleared the balance on the house. With every payment made, a little part of my dignity returned. But deep inside, I wasn't satisfied. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to hurt anyone. But I needed them to know, every one of them, that I saw their true faces when things went dark, that I heard their laughter when I cried, that I remember. So I made a plan. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to rise so high they'd choke on their regret. I stared at the screen, frozen, $850,000. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating. Maybe stress was finally cracking my mind. But I wasn't. This was real. A live spreadsheet dotted with bank codes, transactions, dividends, and silent investments under company names I'd never even heard of. Elijah had been building this portfolio in silence for years, carefully, strategically, without telling a soul. Not even me. That discovery shook me more than the money itself. Why would my husband, my partner, my best friend, hide this? We shared a toothbrush once on a road trip. But he didn't share this? I found myself blinking at the screen like it would somehow answer me. The USB also held scanned documents, property deeds, insurance policies, even digital keys to crypto wallets. One note caught my eye. Emergency only. Activate if hospitalized more than 30 days. I was furious and grateful at the same time. Furious that he hid it. Grateful he had. As I sat on the dusty attic floor, clutching the red notebook, surrounded by insulation and forgotten memories, I realized the truth. Elijah had never been careless. He had been calculating, protecting, preparing for me, for Isla, for exactly this nightmare we were living. The next morning, I returned to the hospital. He was awake, alert, tired but alive. He looked up and saw the notebook in my hands. His face relaxed. You found it? Yes, I replied coldly. I found it. Now tell me, why the hell didn't you tell me any of this? Elijah closed his eyes slowly, because I knew what it would look like. A secret account, hidden money. You'd think I was keeping it from you. I wasn't. I was keeping it for you. You could have told me. I know. But I've seen what happens when people know you have money. Even family turns into vultures. He wasn't wrong. And as angry as I was, I also couldn't deny the protection he'd given us. That night, I cried, not because I was scared, but because for the first time in months, I wasn't. We had hope. We had options. And more than anything, we had choices again. Over the next few days, Elijah's recovery shocked the medical staff. The doctors, once stiff and grave, now used words like remarkable and unprecedented. They didn't understand it. I didn't either. But I didn't question it. I was just grateful. Within a week, he was transferred out of the ICU. I paid the hospital bill in full. A single transaction that shut down months of dread. The head nurse blinked twice at the screen before whispering, You paid the entire balance? Yes, I replied. We're settled. But of course, nothing stays private for long in this world. Word got out. And just like that, the floodgates opened. Nia, my older sister, who had ignored my calls and told people I was playing the victim, showed up at my house with a bottle of rose and a barely sincere smile. Just wanted to see how my favorite sister is doing. I opened the door halfway. Now's not a good time. Oh, come on, Jazz, she said, pushing a foot against the door. I was just about to call you when I heard Elijah's awake. God is good, right? Where was God when I called you crying? I snapped. Where were you when Isla hadn't eaten properly in days, and I asked you for $50? She blinked. Her mouth twitched like she was about to form an excuse, but I shut the door before she could find the words. The next visitor was Leah, my so-called best friend, who had ghosted me during Elijah's coma. Now she wanted to meet for brunch. On me, she insisted. I know you've been through so much. At brunch, she launched into a sob story about how her boutique was going under. If you'd consider investing just a small amount, say 10 grand, I could turn things around. I stared at her across the table, sipping my coffee slowly. You mean to tell me you couldn't lend me $50 when my husband was dying, but now I should give you 10,000? She stammered. I didn't mean it like that. Neither did I said, rising. But here we are. Even the neighbor across the street, Mrs. Chambers, showed up with a casserole dish. This was the same woman who told me last winter that my kind always had drama. Now she was smiling, pretending she never said it. Along with the casserole, she handed me a folded note. Inside, her banking details, in case you feel led to give back. I nearly laughed, out loud. It wasn't just them. It was everyone. Elijah's cousin Brian, who once told me I should let go and move on because hospital bills are a trap, called me sobbing, asking for help clearing a credit card debt. A distant aunt who never acknowledged Isla's birth sent us a personalized teddy bear. My old church group started tagging me on social media in prayer chains they never included me in before. I started seeing people for who they really were, not the masks they wore, but the rot beneath. Then came the hardest blow. One night, after putting Isla to bed, I opened a folder on the USB titled Contingency. Inside was a video. I clicked play. Elijah sat in a dim room, wearing a hoodie, face partially lit. His expression was serious, haunted. "If you're watching this," he began, "I didn't make it." I gasped, clutching the edge of the table. "I'm sorry, Jasmine. I should have told you about the accounts. But I had to be sure. I had to protect you from everyone, maybe even from yourself. We think love protects us, but sometimes love blinds us. I know you trust people too easily. You want to see the good. But babe, they don't all deserve it." He paused, voice shaking slightly. "I've seen how people treat others when things fall apart. I've seen smiles turn to smirks. I've seen sympathy rot into resentment. You need to know, not everyone who claps for you wants to see you win." He leaned in closer. "Everything is in your name now. Every dollar, every deed, every investment. Use it wisely. Use it boldly. And Jasmine, don't forget who was there when you had nothing." The screen went black. I sat there in silence, tears falling onto the keyboard. Not just because of the video, but because every word was true. I had seen people's true colors, and they weren't pretty. In the days that followed, I took control, hired a private advisor, paid off every collector, funded an education account for Isla, paid off the mortgage, repaired the house, changed the locks. With each action, I felt myself rebuilding, not just a home, but my power. But a part of me still simmered. They laughed. They watched me crumble. They whispered. They judged. And now that they saw money, they returned, wearing kindness like a borrowed coat. So I made a decision. I wouldn't seek revenge. No, that would be too obvious. I would rebuild in silence, rise in grace, and let my existence be the loudest clapback. Some people scream their comebacks. I preferred mine quiet. No grand announcement. No public declarations. Just calm, intentional moves made behind closed doors. That's how real power works. Not with noise, but with results. And after everything my husband and I had been through, I didn't want applause. I wanted peace. But peace, I was learning, had to be built, brick by brick. Elijah was healing faster than anyone expected. His color returned. His appetite, too. He started cracking jokes again, mostly about hospital food, and how our daughter Isla had turned the nurses into her fan club. The sound of his voice, steady, alive, was the only medicine I'd been craving. But my own healing? That was more complicated. Money didn't erase betrayal. Every night, after Isla was asleep and Elijah drifted off, I sat at the kitchen table, notebook in hand, replaying every conversation, every favor denied, every smirk I remembered from people I once trusted. Not out of revenge, out of clarity. There's a difference. The new financial advisor I hired, her name was Cameron, was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her early 40s. I liked her immediately. She didn't blink at the numbers. She didn't gawk at the story. She just said, "Let's get to work." Cameron helped me untangle Elijah's portfolios. We restructured the savings pulled out of risky accounts and diversified into long-term assets. She also introduced me to something called generational strategy. Basically, how to make sure Isla would never have to start from scratch the way we did. Don't just protect your present. Cameron said, secure your daughter's future. That sentence became my mission. I set up a scholarship fund in Elijah's name for patients from low-income families dealing with liver disease. Quietly. No press. No public ceremony. Just purpose. I also donated anonymously to the same hospital that once sent me late payment notices, asking that they upgrade their family waiting room. I remembered too well the cold plastic chairs and vending machines that refused to take coins. Families deserved better. But my favorite move? I bought a house. Not a mansion. Not a show-off property. A cozy 2-story home in a quiet neighborhood where Isla could play outside, and I didn't have to sleep with one eye open. It had a porch, a sunroom, and a garden that had been neglected by the previous owner. The day we moved in, I stood in the doorway and took a long breath. I had come back from nothing. I had buried my pride, watched my life crumble, then rose from it holding my child in one arm and a blueprint in the other. But of course, the watchers returned. My social media, once quiet, started lighting up again. Old acquaintances liking my posts, sliding into my DMs with, "Hey stranger," or "We should catch up sometime." Catch up. You ghosted me when my husband was dying, and now you want brunch? I didn't reply. Silence was the only response they deserved. What shook me most was when my mother called. We hadn't spoken in over a year. Not since she told me I married beneath myself, and that real men don't get sick, they get up. I'd swallowed that insult then, chalked it up to her harsh upbringing. But I never forgot it. She called one evening while I was watering the garden. "Jasmine," she said, "I heard about Elijah. I'm glad he's okay." I said nothing. "I was thinking," she continued, "maybe we could talk. I could come by. Bring your favorite soup." "You mean the soup you didn't bring when I was crying on the floor?" Her silence on the other end was thick. "I'm sorry," she said. "I was wrong. I didn't say no, but I didn't say yes either. I simply said, 'Thank you,' and hung up, because forgiveness doesn't always mean reconnection. Sometimes it just means letting go of the weight so you can rise higher. Isla was adjusting too. She loved her new school, her new room, and the swing Elijah hung from the tree out back. She'd ask questions sometimes about why certain people didn't visit anymore, why Auntie Nia stopped calling, why Miss Leah didn't bring cupcakes like she used to. I told her the truth in simple terms. Sometimes people only show up when they think you're winning, but real love shows up when you're losing. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. One Sunday afternoon, as Elijah and I sat on the porch watching Isla chase butterflies, he turned to me and said, "You've changed." I looked at him, heart thudding. "Not in a bad way," he said quickly, "in a strong way, like a woman who's seen fire and didn't burn." I didn't know what to say, so I just reached over and took his hand. Later that week, something odd happened. I got a letter, not an email, an actual envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a card, handwritten, in shaky, unsure cursive. "You probably don't want to hear from me. I laughed when you cried. I said things I regret. I was cruel. I didn't understand what you were going through. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I wanted to say sorry. That's all. No name, just the message." And somehow it meant more than a dozen apologies from people who never meant it. I placed the letter in a box with other memories, Elijah's hospital bracelet, a picture of Isla visiting him in the ICU, the first overdue bill that once made me sob in the bathroom. That box stayed in the top of my closet, not to haunt me, but to remind me, because I never wanted to forget where we came from. People look at money like it's a shield, but what I learned is money only reveals what was already inside. The cruelty, the love, the envy, the loyalty, it magnifies everything. And in that mirror, I saw truths I never would have seen if we had remained broke and struggling. I saw the ones who only clapped when we won. I saw the ones who disappeared when it got hard. And I saw me, who rose not out of spite, but because giving up was never an option. Healing is strange. It doesn't happen all at once like the movies show you. It happens quietly between chores over coffee, while folding laundry, while scrolling through old photos you once cried over but now stare at blankly. One day, you realize the panic has faded, the shame has softened, and the anger isn't eating you alive anymore. That was me, after everything we went through. Elijah's coma, Isla's confusion, my isolation, the betrayals, the miracle recovery, and the secret fortune. I expected my life to take off in loud, glamorous ways. Instead, it blossomed quietly and beautifully. I began saying no without guilt. I stopped explaining my decisions, and I walked away from anyone who made me feel small during the darkest season of my life. That included my sister Nia. She had tried to reinsert herself gently, dropping random texts like, "Just thinking of you, and we should catch up." But I hadn't forgotten how she told my mother I was playing victim when I couldn't pay the hospital bill. I hadn't forgotten how she laughed when I launched a fundraiser. What I did forget was how her words used to pierce me. They no longer did. One Saturday, while tending to my small garden in the backyard, my phone buzzed. Another message from Nia. "I miss my sister. Let's talk." I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it, not out of spite, but because closure, I'd learned, doesn't always need a conversation. Sometimes closure is just never looking back. Meanwhile, Elijah was thriving. His liver function was nearly restored, and he was slowly working with a physical therapist to rebuild his strength. Watching him walk around the house, humming again, lifting Isla into his arms, it felt like watching a second life bloom. He no longer asked about the money. He trusted that I had handled everything, and I had. In fact, I had exceeded every financial goal we set. With Cameron's guidance, we invested in a small commercial property, leased it to a dental office, and watched the passive income flow in. I also started a small business consulting firm, from home, focused on helping other women organize their finances after hardship. I didn't advertise. I didn't post dramatic updates on social media. I moved in silence like I always had, but my presence started to grow regardless. A podcast interview here, a webinar guest appearance there. Eventually, women from across the country reached out asking for guidance, not from an expert, but from someone who had been there. One morning, I opened my inbox to find a message from a local university. "We're organizing a Women in Adversity panel. Would you consider joining us as a guest speaker?" I smiled, not because I needed the recognition, but because I was being asked to speak in rooms I was once denied entry into. The panel was small but meaningful. I wore a beige suit, modest heels, and no jewelry but my wedding ring. I wasn't there to impress. I was there to pour. I shared the story briefly, but I spent more time on the aftermath. The real aftermath. The part where you're healing in silence and everyone's gone. The part where people think you're doing better, but don't know you still flinch when your phone rings from an unknown number. I spoke about the beauty of rebuilding without bitterness, and the strength it takes to not retaliate when you finally gain leverage. After the event, a student approached me. She was trembling. "My mom died last year. My dad hasn't been the same since. I almost dropped out of school until I heard you speak. Thank you for showing me that survival isn't shameful." I hugged her tight because I remembered being her. I remembered needing one voice, just one, to tell me I could still make it. That hug stayed with me for days. Later that week, I went to the old neighborhood where we used to live before everything collapsed. The building was still there, peeling paint, the cracked pavement, the mailbox where I once received collection notices and bad news. I didn't go to gloat. I went to say goodbye. I stood outside for a long time, remembering who I was the day I rushed Elijah to the ER. The day I slept on a bench beside him. The day I skipped meals so Isla wouldn't go hungry. I remembered every insult, every fake friend, every slammed door. But mostly I remembered my own voice whispering, "Don't give up." I walked away that afternoon lighter than I'd been in years. Elijah, meanwhile, had started journaling again. It helped him process his brush with death. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at Isla while she played, and his eyes would water. "I almost missed this," he whispered once. "I almost left you alone." "But you didn't," I said, holding his hand. "You stayed." One evening, we got an unexpected visitor. It was Leah. She stood at our gate, holding a small potted plant. Awkward, nervous, unsure. "I'm not here to take anything," she said. I realized I never truly apologized. I didn't interrupt. "I was scared," she continued. "I didn't know how to help. And instead of being there, I vanished. And now I see how wrong that was." I nodded. "I appreciate the honesty. But you also need to understand, some doors don't open again. Not because of hate, but because of growth." She nodded, left the plant, and walked away. I didn't feel smug. I felt grateful, because I had reached a point where peace mattered more than revenge. That night, I sat down to write a letter. Not to anyone, just to myself. "Dear Jasmine, you did it. You survived the fire. You didn't just make it, you turned ashes into architecture. You refused to become bitter. You became better. And now, let them watch you rise, not to prove a point, but to prove what's possible. Love, your strongest self." The thing about tables is they always turn. Slowly, quietly, and sometimes when you least expect it. But when they do, you better believe everyone notices. My name was starting to spread, first in small circles, then across platforms I never thought I'd be mentioned on. Local magazines started requesting interviews. One even called me a resilience advocate, whatever that meant. But I wasn't chasing headlines. I was chasing purpose. And, strangely, purpose started chasing me back. My consulting work began growing rapidly. I was helping other women, many single moms, widows, caretakers, navigate the aftermath of financial ruin. Not just how to budget, but how to rebuild their confidence, their voice, their sense of self-worth. I became known as the woman who came back from everything. But with every glow-up came the shadows. Nia reappeared again, this time with urgency. She messaged me on a Tuesday night. I hadn't heard from her in weeks. "Jasmine, I don't know where else to turn. Can we talk?" I ignored it at first. Then she called. I let it ring twice before I answered. "What is it, Nia?" Her voice cracked. "I lost my job. And I'm being evicted. I have nowhere to go. Jasmine, please. I know I wasn't there for you, but I'm asking now, as your sister." It took everything in me not to respond with what I really felt. The woman who once laughed at my tears was now drowning in her own. The same woman who told others, Jasmine thought she was better than us, was now standing outside the same pride she once weaponized. "I'll help," I said slowly, "but not in the way you expect." "What do you mean?" "I'm not giving you money. I'll help you build. I'll help you plan. But this isn't a rescue. This is a lesson." She sighed, defeated but desperate. "I'll take it." And just like that, the sister who mocked my downfall became the student of my rise. I gave her steps, a job application strategy, a debt breakdown worksheet, a timeline, not a single dollar. But by the second week, she was calling to say, I had an interview, and by the third, she had a part-time job. Humble work, but honest. "I don't know how you forgave me," she admitted one night. "I didn't do it for you. I said, I did it for me. Carrying bitterness would have only slowed me down. Meanwhile, Elijah was beginning to talk about legacy. I want to start something, he said one morning over tea. Something small. A health initiative, maybe for low-income families dealing with liver conditions. I love that. I smiled. You could partner with the hospital. I want it to be independent, he replied. Something that runs even if the hospitals don't care. Something real. So we did it. We launched the Blake Wellness Fund. We started small. Monthly grants to 5 families. A nutrition partnership with a local food bank. We used part of the investment returns, carefully managed, and built a transparent, community-driven operation. And then the recognition came. Again, one of the hospital directors, who once couldn't remember my name, now invited us to be keynote guests at their annual fundraiser. Your resilience has inspired the entire board, she wrote. We'd be honored if you and Elijah shared your journey. We agreed, but I didn't do it for applause. I did it because someone like me would be sitting in that crowd, barely holding on, and they'd need to know that surviving wasn't shameful. That night, I stood on stage in a flowing emerald green dress. Elijah beside me, Isla in the front row, clapping like her life depended on it. I told our story, not from the lens of pain, but from the lens of power. I spoke of the nights I cried in silence. The meals skipped. The prayers prayed when I didn't know if I believed anymore. And then I said something that even caught me off guard. People didn't just doubt me. They dismissed me. And I thank them for it, because their silence taught me how to scream without sound, to move without noise, to rebuild without permission. So to anyone here who feels abandoned, good. Let that fire sharpen you, because the table will turn. And when it does, it won't need to be loud. It'll just need to be yours. The standing ovation shook me, not because it made me proud, but because I could feel that the words landed. After the gala, a woman approached me in tears. Her husband was dying. She was 3 months behind on rent. Her family wouldn't even pick up her calls. You reminded me I'm not weak, she whispered. I hugged her like a sister. You're not. You're a storm in stillness. And I meant it. But storms don't stop. They just shift. 2 weeks later, I received a letter. A legal one. It was from Elijah's estranged father. The same man who abandoned him as a child. The same man who never showed up in the hospital. The same man who told Elijah years ago that he'd never amount to anything. He had heard about the fund, about the foundation, the buzz, and now he wanted a meeting. He's just trying to attach himself to the legacy. Elijah said flatly, "Do you want to meet him?" I asked. No, but I want closure. So we did. He met us at a cafe. Gray hair, older now, weary eyes. No apologies, just awkward attempts at small talk. You've built something incredible, he finally said. I just wanted to say, I'm proud. Elijah didn't respond immediately. Then he said, it's funny, you left before any of this, and now that I've made something of myself, you show up. His father lowered his eyes. I don't expect forgiveness. You won't get it, Elijah said, but you will get peace, because I'm not carrying what you did anymore. You can go now. And he did. It was the first time I saw Elijah truly reclaim his voice. After that, something changed in us. Not just confidence, conviction. We weren't the victims of our past anymore. We were the authors of our future. A few months later, Isla started kindergarten. She wore a pink backpack and marched through those school gates like a queen. I held back tears, not because I was sad, but because I'd survived long enough to see her flourish. After drop-off, Elijah and I sat in the car in silence. Then he turned to me. We're really okay, aren't we? I nodded, smiling through watery eyes. We're more than okay. We're free. There's a calm that comes after the storm. Not the dramatic kind. Not the one in movies where everyone cheers and credits roll. It's quieter, softer. It's the kind of peace that feels earned, not because things are perfect, but because you've learned to breathe again on your own terms. That's the life we were living now. After Isla started kindergarten, the house got quieter during the day. I started waking up early, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I'd sit by the window with tea, sometimes just watching the morning light crawl over the garden. That same garden I once couldn't afford to water. That same home I almost lost. Every corner of that house held a memory, a bruise, a blessing, and yet none of it looked like revenge, because we weren't living to prove anything to anyone anymore. We were living in peace. Elijah's health had stabilized. His doctors called it a textbook miracle, and while I knew medicine had played a role, I also believed in something greater, in resilience, in grace, in the fierce will of a man who had unfinished business with life. The Blake Wellness Fund had grown too. We had doubled our outreach. Families were getting prescriptions they couldn't previously afford. Kids were eating again. Husbands were surviving. Wives were resting. And we did it all with the money Elijah once hid, money he never meant to flaunt. He saved it in silence. And now we spent it with purpose. One afternoon, I received an email that made me freeze in place. You've been nominated for the Strong Roots Humanitarian Award. At first, I thought it was a scam. But it wasn't. The award was real, national, prestigious. Past winners included doctors, activists, and entrepreneurs. And this year, someone had submitted my name. You've changed lives, the committee chair said during a phone call. That deserves to be honored. I said yes, not because I wanted the spotlight, but because I wanted to represent every woman who had ever been underestimated, every wife who stood in hospital hallways with shaking hands, every mother who fought without armor. The event was held in Atlanta, a grand ballroom. Lights, cameras, people in gowns and tuxedos. I wore navy blue. Elijah wore a black suit with a small gold pin. Isla had picked it out. When they called my name, I felt the room disappear. I walked to the stage, heartbeat steady, head held high. I used to think survival was enough. I began. But then I realized survival is just the beginning. I shared our journey, but only enough to make the point. The rest I saved for the people who lived it with me. I closed with this. Don't let your suffering make you silent. Let it make you unshakable. And when the world doubts you, rebuild anyway. After the ceremony, people lined up to speak with me. Some wanted photos. Some wanted to cry. One woman held my hands and said, "You gave me hope I didn't even know I needed." I thought of the version of me who once cried on the kitchen floor, clutching a hospital bill, the version who rationed meals, the version who begged and was laughed at. She didn't die. She evolved. Later that night, in our hotel room, Elijah sat on the edge of the bed and pulled me into his arms. "Do you realize what you've done?" he asked. I shook my head. "You became the woman they tried to break." I rested my head on his shoulder. "And you became the man who came back when no one thought you would." We didn't need to say much after that. The next morning, we flew back home. Isla greeted us with finger-painted signs and a crown she made in class that said, "Queen Mommy." I laughed until I cried. That evening, we sat together as a family on the back patio. The sky turned pink. Isla sang softly to herself, swaying in her little hammock. I leaned into Elijah. "Do you ever think about how close we came to losing all this?" I asked. "All the time," he replied. "And that's why I'll never take it for granted again." We sat in silence, a warm, earned, knowing silence. Not every story needs a happy ending wrapped in bows. Ours wasn't perfect, but it was real, raw, honest, We had loved, lost, fought, rebuilt, and we did it in silence while the world watched, doubted, judged, and eventually clapped. They laughed when my husband fell sick, but they stopped laughing when he woke up with a secret. And we never stopped rising after that.